Welcome to CRE Success, the podcast, where we help people working in commercial real estate achieve their professional goals. Check us out online at cresuccess.co/podcast. And now here's your host, Darren Krakowiak.
Hey, welcome back to CRE Success, the podcast. We're up to episode 17 in season 2. My name is Darren Krakowiak, and my special guest today is Theo Kapodistrias. Theo is a keynote speaker, a trainer, and an advisor. He's set up his own personal brand about 18 months ago. He's from Tasmania in Australia, and we're going to be talking about how to improve your communication skills, how to become a better presenter. You'll definitely improve if you listen to what Theo has to say. We'll speak to Theo in just a moment. Before we do that, I is for improve in the A to Z of CRE prospecting. If you'd like to get your hands on 26 great ideas to help you with prospecting, including the letter I, and really the point about improving is the more that you do something, the better you'll get, unless of course you're doing it wrong. And if you are doing it wrong, well then get someone to give you some ideas on how you can improve by getting constructive feedback. That's just one idea in the A to Z of CRE prospecting. If you'd like to grab it, go to cresuccess.co/ABC. We'll speak to Theo in just 30 seconds. 90% of the world's data was generated in the last 2 years. CRE is a business intelligence and analytics tool for commercial real estate professionals. Using real-time insights, track key portfolio metrics and benchmark against the market so you can make faster and well-informed decisions. With live dashboards and bespoke reporting, impress both your executive team and your property clients. It's time to turn data into your most valuable asset with CRE from Released.
And now it's time for the interview on CRE Success, the podcast.
Theo, welcome to CRE Success, the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, the first thing we do in all of our interviews on this podcast is step into the virtual elevator and we hear our guests give us their elevator pitch. So Theo, who are you?
Well, I am Theo. I am the general counsel of a global technology company, and I run a little side hustle where I help people simplify their communications to amplify their message. And in my side business, I'm a keynote speaker, trainer, and an advisor.
And you're based in Hobart?
And based in Hobart, absolutely.
Wow, we have one member from Hobart, which I think means we've got a pretty good level of market penetration in that city, given I don't know how many commercial real estate professionals there are in Hobart. But for those listeners who don't know Australia well, just tell us a little bit about Tasmania and Hobart.
Sure. So Tasmania is, I guess, a little island at the bottom of Australia. And I guess we're known as like the natural state. So it's very clean and green. We've got some of the cleanest air in all of the world, which is pretty amazing. Hobart is the capital and everyone calls it like a big town. So a pretty small place of about, 250,000 people in Hobart. And I think all of Tasmania, there's about 500,000 people. It's amazing. It's one of the oldest cities in Australia. I think it's the second oldest capital city. And it's really just, like a big little town, basically. Like it's by the river, nestled in between like a big mountain and the river, basically. And, lots of hills and wildlife here. It's pretty cool. It's a place to be. I reckon it's probably one of the most unique cities in all of Australia.
Beautiful. And when did the Kapodistrias clan move to Tasmania?
So my grandparents first moved here. It would have been probably the 60s. So they are the Karamalis family. And then my dad moved down here, would have been in the 80s when he married my mum. So yeah, wow. Then I popped up in 1990.
Awesome. Well, look, let's talk about your side hustle, which is the speaking practice. You started that in 2020 when the future of live events was under a huge cloud. Why were you motivated to start up a side hustle as a speaker?
Awesome question. So I had been, I guess, doing the speaking thing for a little while at legal events and other conferences. And for me, I just, I loved it. So I was getting asked to speak all over the place. I was speaking in New Zealand, other cities in Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, all of that. And I was getting like free flights and accommodation to speak at all of these events. And I thought, I really love this. And I thought this is something I could probably do professionally and get, paid for it. I'd love to, embrace in doing more of this because I just find it so fun. And with that, I thought, I've got my own message to share. I don't need to follow and speak on legal related things. I can kind of do my own thing because I've got my own thought leadership and my own ideas and my own work that I've done, which I think is an important message for other people to hear. So I was planning it at the end of 2019. I thought, yep, this is my strategy. This is what I'm going to do. And then in the summer of 2020, it would have been January, I was putting together my website and, all my materials.
Blissfully unaware of what was going on in China at the time.
Blissfully unaware. I had no idea what was going on. And, I was feeling a bit nervous, a bit of the imposter syndrome thing, between then and actually launching the website and going public to say, I'm charging for this now. And, gained the confidence in March, the beginning of March. I said, yep, I'm going to put it out there. Let's do it. Here I am. I'm a speaker. You can hire me for your event. And it would have been probably the week after that, the world went in lockdown. And that's when the whole COVID-19 thing became apparent that it wasn't going away anytime soon. I think in those early days of 2020, it was just something you heard a bit on the news and it was just, it'll go away. It's probably going to be like swine flu. It'll pop up for a little bit, but then it'll disappear.
It became a thing, didn't it?
Became a thing, the whole thing. Still a thing now.
It is. Well, I was thinking about your business and obviously, you're not just doing speaking. There's some other parts which we'll talk about as well. But with international travel in Australia, it's Fortress Australia, right? So people can hardly fly out and very limited opportunities for people to come into Australia. So I'm wondering, does that mean that there's more opportunities for a speaker who is based in Australia because there's less overseas competition? Or does that mean that there's less opportunity for your business overall because you can't travel overseas? What's the net effect of the speaking business for somebody who's based in Australia?
It's pretty interesting because now there are global opportunities available. So everyone's kind of on a level playing field of, I can speak at your event and you don't need to pay me to be there. As in, you don't need to pay for my flights and accommodation. I get to just log in on a Zoom call or Microsoft Teams or whatever, virtual platform a conference organizer wants to use. The only thing would be, the time difference. But, if you're happy to get up at 3 a.m. and look half decent and speak to an audience which you can't actually see, then I see no problem with that. And, there are the opportunities out there. I think they're hard to find. You really know where to look or who to talk to. But as a speaker, you can definitely get out there and find those opportunities to present at events and conferences and companies from the comfort of your own home, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, look, I understand one of the things that you are able to provide a keynote speech on is the topic of communication and specifically simplifying language to amplify your message. And I think that's a really relevant topic for our listeners because communication is such an important skill, not only in the marketing and sales process, but also in the service delivery phase. So I'm wondering if you can give me one or two exercises that people can do to simplify their message.
Awesome question. I think there's a few things. One of the most important things to do is think about who your audience is. So what does that audience want to hear? What does that other person want to hear? And why is it relevant to them? So with that in mind, that will help guide exactly how much you say, what you need to tell them, and what it is that they need to hear. Because you could tell people all sorts of things, but depending on who it is, it's not going to necessarily be completely relevant. So I guess that's one of the, impeccably important guiding principles. The other is understanding how to use plain English. If you want to reach people in a way that will, touch them, for them to understand, for them to action something, speaking in a language which is understood by anyone and everyone is going to be one of the most important ways that you can really simplify that language to amplify your message. And, it really is about speaking in a language that other people can understand. I think there's some really great, tools out there as well to check, the level of, the readability of something you're doing. If it's a piece of written work, you can, check it online to see, all right, what grade level is this? and a great grade level is probably grade 9. Imagine reading something to someone who's 15 years old. Will they be able to understand it? That's sort of the level you want. And I found that a lot of my technical legal stuff is at quite an advanced level. And I thought, well, that's not useful for my people. If I want to present something in a way that they can understand and embrace and do something with, I need to present it in a way that is basic, but also clear enough for them to really action and do something with. So bringing that readability level down is going to be really critical as well.
So you're talking about reading or speaking, written word or spoken word or both when you're giving that advice, say at the 9th grade level?
It's really both. So I think you can really perfect it initially with your written word to think, all right, so what are the things that I would put in writing that is going to be easy for someone to pick up, read, and understand in action? But once you understand the written format of it, you can then translate that into your spoken word. So you're more likely to speak in a plainer English when you're communicating verbally anyway, because you're more likely to think like that. It's easier, it's quicker. And when you write, you tend to think about it a bit harder, and you want to make it sound a bit nicer and fancier. So you do end up putting, some of those longer technical pieces in there. But I guess from a starting principle to help, and practically as well, to really nail that sort of idea of simplifying your communication and your language, is to commence with a written piece of work and strip it down. And then with that, you'll be guided in terms of how you can speak that and verbally present that to other people as well.
And one thing I've heard when you're writing is that you want to read it out aloud and make sure it sounds natural when you read it out aloud, so it doesn't come across as too, I don't know, pontificating when someone else is reading it. Is that a relevant tip as well?
That's a great tip. Yeah, one of the things I tell people to do, particularly if they want to sound more authentic in how they present and how they speak or write in that way, is to record something and have it transcribed. So that's a really easy way to just speak, to write in a way that you actually speak. So if you can use something like, I don't know, Otter AI, that's a handy tool.
Yep.
For example, you can speak into that app, and then it just writes out everything as if you were saying it verbatim.
It's funny. It's like the opposite of the way I learned it, but it's the same outcome. And in some ways it might be more efficient because you're just saying it as you would say it, and then you get the words on the page. So It's a good tip. Let's talk about presentation skills. This is one that I've covered for our members. I believe, in the importance of preparation and practicing and making sure you've got all the tech and the logistics covered on the day and having a strong close. And I think presenting is an interesting one because some people are naturally good at it, but everyone can attain a higher level of competency because it's a skill that you can improve. So what is a key message that you try and get across about the skill of presenting?
I always think one of the most important things is when you're presenting, you are going to feel the nervousness, you are going to feel fear, but that is something you can embrace. I think no matter what level of, skill level you have, even if you are a very advanced speaker or presenter, you're always going to feel a bit of anxiousness, a bit of nerves, but that's something you can embrace and you can take with you to power you to actually present well. There are heaps of techniques out there as well to calm yourself down if you are feeling really uncomfortably nervous. Something I tell people about is box breathing. So breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds. Doing that in rotation will help calm you down. And that's going to be, that's a really important thing. So you feel confident to get up on stage and to speak, or, virtual stage, if that's, where you're presenting. The other is, don't think of your presentation as a presentation. Your presentation is a conversation. It sounds a bit more natural when you present, when you speak in a way that it really is as if you are speaking with people in a room, right? Or, one-on-one with someone, rather than, getting up there and thinking that it's a whole dramatic piece. it's pretty interesting how people treat a Zoom or a corporate presentation on stage completely differently than they would a conversation. And of course, you do have to speak slower, you have to articulate your words better, but ultimately you are having a discussion with people. And I think that's just a different way of looking at the presentation rather than thinking, it has to be 100% perfect. It is just it's a bit of a chat, but it's just done in a bit of a different way.
Great tip. You also offer workshops on the topic of negotiation, and you've got one, I guess it's something that people can go to you and ask for, which is Be a Kickass Negotiator is the name of is that a workshop or is that a speech?
That's a workshop. So
I love that title, by the way. I mean, it sounds like something that, and I, with the greatest respect, that Donald Trump might have ghostwritten in the 90s, or because it's such a strong title, right? And the importance of having a strong title is a really great hook. And Be a Kickass Negotiator, you know exactly what you're going to get if you go and do that workshop.
Well, that's the hope, right? So I guess as part of what I do the keynote speaking. I also do training and workshops. So I've converted a lot of my keynotes into a workshop format, but some are better as just workshops. And one of them is my How to Be a Kick-Ass Negotiator. And why I thought this would be relevant, I guess, from both my perspective as a lawyer. So I'm the general counsel for a global technology company. I negotiate all the time. But negotiation is a form of communication, once again. When you are in a negotiation similar to a presentation, it's a conversation. It's how can you speak to these other people about this situation to really get your point across, but also understand where they're coming from. So it's embracing some of these really critical skills in communication of listening to what the other party is saying, being able to communicate back what's important to you, but also acknowledging what you've heard from the other side. And I give examples of really awesome negotiators out there who you don't think are actually a negotiator. And one of those people is Oprah Winfrey. If you've watched her in interviews, she has this amazing ability to ask questions and gain information from other people. And those are just her interviewing skills, but it's what you need to do in a negotiation. You need to ask those questions to then elicit information, which then you can use because you now understand the other side's perspective a little bit better as to what their issue is or what's important to them. And asking those questions, embracing that conversation, it's really going to help anyone kind of resolve that conflict. And it's quite interesting to see people, at the beginning of that workshop and then at the end to say, you know what, I've now got a better idea of how to approach a negotiation, how to present myself in a negotiation, and what I should do and shouldn't do to get the best result. So it's a bit of fun. I think it's, slightly to the side of like my main message, but it kind of neatly blends in with what I'm trying to get out there in the world. So yeah.
No, I like that tip about what you said about Oprah Winfrey. And I saw something recently that the way to increase your chances of getting what you want is just to provide a reason or to provide some context, or, in the way you're talking about it there is sort of like framing a question. And people are more likely, like the way that I saw it was, if you want to cut in front of someone in a line, if you go and say to somebody, I want to cut in front of the line, they're not likely to let you do that. But if you give them a reason, any reason, they're more likely to let you do that because you're framing what it is that you want. So I think it's a really good tip.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great.
Let's talk about personal branding now, because you've started up this business about a year and a half ago. Obviously, you had some speaking credentials because you were already doing speaking, but now you've launched this Theo Kap brand, and it's a personal brand, right? Because you haven't called it mine is CRE Success, even though it's pretty much me, but I didn't call it Darren Krakowiak Commercial Real Estate. So why did you decide to set it up as a personal brand as opposed to a general company name brand?
So I had, I guess, my own sort of name out there in the world. I'm pretty well known in the legal space I'm kind of well known in the Tasmanian space as well. So I thought, well, if people are, already look at me, I thought this is something that, I want to, do for myself. I didn't want to put it under a different name. I thought for me, I want people to, come to me because they want to hear from me rather than like a specific sort of brand or a title.
Yeah.
So I've embraced, I guess, the speaking and the training and the advising modules as part of just my personal brand. And that is, people can engage me to present this stuff and to help them with their communication issues. And that's something that, is important to me on my social media as well. I don't like to put myself in a box. I like to do a number of different things. I'm involved in a heap of different things, and I kind of mix and match and blend everything together because it aligns with my values. And that's what's important to my personal brand. That is, presenting stuff to the outer world that is important to me through all of my various social media platforms. And yeah, presenting it in a way that says, this aligns to what I'm doing because, X, Y, Z. And doing all these things aligns with, I guess, my purpose for being, which is, to support other people, to, provide a service, to, help people with this goal. And yeah, it's been pretty fun to, I guess, create this new sort of brand for myself, but also, trying to blend in and really justify all the things that I'm doing that kind of mesh with that together. And, I guess with that, I've taken on like a new endeavor recently, which is Tedx Hobart, being the licensee for the Tedx event here in Hobart. And, how does that align with everything that I do as well? So it's been really interesting to think about that and create something new just for myself.
Awesome. I do want to get a little bit more information about TEDx, but before we move to that, just to sort of close the loop on social media, I know that you're active on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Clubhouse. What are some of the nuances that you've noticed between the different platforms when it comes to how you want to communicate with people who are on those platforms?
It's pretty interesting that I guess the platforms have such a different market. So it's important to think about who do you want to reach, because that's where the target market is for a particular thing. So for, I guess, my sort of my business, I thought, well, Instagram is good for reaching people in a younger demographic. So doing stuff such as reels or, carousel sort of documents which people can save and look at later with like hot tips and stuff like that is useful for that sort of younger demographic. Moving to other platforms such as LinkedIn, that's where I can promote some of my keynotes and, the people in the conference and events world who are on there looking for people who are actually looking to engage people in that space.
I've noticed on your Instagram, you share a bit of personal stuff as well. So where do you draw the line when it comes to sharing personal information? Because one thing I think some people struggle with is that they want to show a bit of themselves. They know that it's important as part of an overall, building affinity with their audience, but they don't know what they should share when it comes to sharing personal. So do you have a strategy or something that you can share that can help people understand how they should show a bit of them personal selves on these platforms?
I think it's important to ask yourself, how much do you want to put out there in the world and what are you comfortable with other people seeing? Noting that anything you put out into the world is there forever. So are you going to put your really strong opinion about lockdowns or, checking in or the COVID vaccine online for people to see later and think, oh, this person's a nut job, or I'm not comfortable with that. Or, if you've gone through a relationship breakdown and you're sharing, images and all of that from that thing, like, is that going to be a really good idea to actually, share any of that information with the wider world? Probably not. It's thinking about, that crafting that personal brand message to the wider world is essentially saying, this is what I want to put out for people to see. So if I'm doing personal stuff, it's generally me in my hometown with my friends or family, or, doing something which is kind of enjoyable and positive. I'll share pictures from, destinations I've been to. I might share pictures with friends or dinners or stuff like that. That's kind of just saying, hey, I'm a real person. So behind the speaking, behind the law stuff, behind the TEDx stuff, I'm actually a human who has a life. I'm quite social, quite the extrovert. So I think it's okay for people to, see bits of the real you. For me as well, because I haven't created a separate Instagram for my business. I've kind of just meshed it into my own Instagram because I've got a pretty good following. So I thought, well, I don't want to start from scratch because that'll be, that's hard. That's hard work. I could separate it, but it is me. So meshing my speaking with my real life, with my law stuff, all kind of works. It works from my perspective anyway, for my personal brand. I mean, it's going to be different for everyone. If people are creating a completely separate brand and business, they might want to, start from scratch. But for me, it works. For what I'm doing, it kind of works. In my view, anyway.
Just quickly, Theo, because we're nearly out of time, what's your vision for the Tedx Hobart license that you hold?
Well, Dan, I'm very excited to bring TEDx back to Hobart. So we have not had a TEDx event here for 7 years, I think. So when the opportunity came about to create a TEDx event, I thought, well, I've got to do it. So really, for me, it's a few things. It's about creating a community to share really brilliant ideas from my home with the wider world. What TED is amazing at is putting people in the spotlight who don't ordinarily have the spotlight. So I get to work with amazing people doing amazing things in my home, and I get to give them the spotlight to really communicate what they're doing and their value with, a whole new audience, a whole range of people who may have never heard about this amazing thing. The whole idea around TED is ideas worth spreading. So for me to be able to find people who are doing incredible things in the community, thinking differently outside the box, and have an idea that, is worth sharing with the world, and I can help them to amplify that message, then I absolutely will. TED and TEDx kind of aligns with a lot of what I'm doing in my business, and that is being able to grab someone's idea and present it and present their value in a way that it can be reached by a huge audience. It's about amplifying that message, and TED really provides that opportunity. So I'm pretty excited to get to work with such awesome people. I'm receiving submissions at the moment, although I haven't officially launched the submission portal. People are submitting their ideas through, and I'm pretty pumped to see what's coming and what people are thinking of. It's pretty great. We've got a very cool community down here.
Well, awesome. We look forward to seeing the launch and then the inevitable growth of the TEDx Hobart chapter. Theo, if our listeners would like to find out more about your services and connect with your content, is theokap.com.au the best place to go?
That is the best place to go, but people can also find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram at TheoKap88.
Awesome. Theo, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being my guest on CRE Success, the podcast.
No worries. Thank you very much.
For more information about our guest, visit cresuccess.co/podcast. And now a final thought from Darren Krakowiak.
Thank you once again to Theo for being my guest. And also I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Aiton. Aiton has left a review for us in Apple Podcasts. We've got 5 stars from Aiton. Thank you very much. He says, great podcasts. I always enjoy listening. Darren asks the right questions and the guests always provide insights into the industry. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you taking the time to make that comment and to provide that rating. If you're enjoying CRE Success, the podcast, why not just leave us a quick review? Or if that sounds like too much work, just open the podcast player and click on the 5-star button, and that helps other people find this content. I do hope you're enjoying it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you soon.
Thanks for listening to CRE Success, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to us on your favourite podcast platform and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. For more information about the show, just check the show notes on your podcast app or visit us online at cresuccess.co.